you blew our record up. I mean, like
Yeah.
our record for submissions for these things has been about 400. Jen, we are at 1,000.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Oh, I'm turning bright red. Thank you.
We'll get around and
Great.
introduce everybody quickly, just so everybody watching and listening, you get introduced to who we are and what we're doing. My name's Max Tim. I'm the Director of Education with the International Screenwriters Association. I'm also a consultant with my little company called The Story Farm. Jen Grisanti and I go way back, probably almost 10 years, Jen, in terms of just knowing each other and being in the industry and helping writers. I have a craft course with the ISA, an online course, inexpensive way to keep yourself busy. ISA has a ton of other ways to just stay busy during this time with free podcasts and other things on the website. And we'll probably have everybody give little bits of that as we go through.
Hello, everybody. Hiya. I'm here from the Treehouse in California. Although obviously I'm not there originally. I'm from London town, but I've been in LA for, oh my goodness, over 10 years now. I've been with the ISA for 6 years. I'm the Director of Development. My passion are screenwriters, good stories, diverse voices, and changing the world through story. We're always looking for screenwriters. We're always supporting the screenwriting community. And we love Jen. Jen is such a supporter of the ISA, and we love Jen straight the way back. And if you're a screenwriter out there, then do join the ISA. We want to hear from you. We want to hear and tell your stories.
First off, I want to give a shout out. I've seen a lot of of our Third Thursdays local coordinators that are present as well. So hello, all of you, and thank you all. While we can't have those fun in-person meetings, it's fun to still be connecting with you here. One of the things I do is I get to go around, well, usually when the world is a different place, to a whole bunch of different film festivals and interview people on camera, filmmakers and writers, directors, actors, and hopefully can learn about their films while learning about what they learned so that you guys can learn through it without going through the same mistakes that they went through. And you can find all of those videos over at our Pro Tips and Tricks page. And right now we've got over 600 videos on that page, and we're adding more every single day. I adore Jen Grisanti. Anytime she comes up in conversation, which is a lot actually, it just makes the conversation a happier place. So we're happy that you are here with us.
Oh,
now,
you make me happy. Thank you, Scott.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carissa Tate. I am the Marketing and Social Media Manager, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for spending your Wednesday night with us. It's Wednesday, right? Okay. Anyways, we're all there. Everyone's feeling it. If you guys don't follow us on social yet, I highly recommend that you do. It's at Network ISA on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are announcing a very exciting contest come next week. I don't know what days are anymore, but it's happening, and it's going to be soon. And to be able to get all the details, follow us on social because we'll be announcing it. It has to do with pitching. So if you have a pitch, start, sharpening it up. But yes, definitely follow us on social, and thank you all for being here.
Hello, I'm Danielle. I'm the creative director for the ISA. I manage our brand as well as work on our website and the ISA Connect membership. And if you're not familiar with the ISA Connect membership, it's the online platform that we built for screenwriters to work on your craft and to make the connections that you would really benefit from to take your career to the next level. And if you have a membership, you can list your log lines, screenplays, contest awards, writing success stories, and really just build out a robust writer profile to showcase yourself to industry pros that are browsing the site. And you can also submit to unlimited writing gigs. We're working on a ton of new features in the next few months that we're all really excited about. So if you want to learn more, I'll put the link in the chat.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaron. I'm the creative executive for the ISA. I work directly with Felicity, heading up the development slate, and I look for content across all of our various platforms like contests, writing gigs, all that stuff. I head up the team of readers that also look through all that stuff, and we're constantly looking for great new work. I just want to say the ISA has helped get me through this whole thing. It's to continue to help me get through. I love this team. I love my job. I love writing. I love finding new voices and stuff. This whole community and this thing is great. So it helps us too to see all you people come and want to partake.
That was lovely. I love this so much. This team is fantastic. Jen, we all love you. You can tell. I mean, you're blowing up this webinar like crazy. It's so exciting. I mean, we had no idea starting out, thrown into this new reality where things were going to land, especially with us doing live events every month. And we said, well, let's try a webinar. Let's try a virtual event. And lo and behold, people took to it, and really we're getting such great feedback from everyone on this call. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reaching out and telling us that this is making a difference for you. That's really incredible. And it's really keeping all of us afloat and, helping bring our spirits up too. There's a reason for all of us to be here. I think that, right now we're all affected differently during this time. It's a very uncertain time, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety and stress and all the things that go along with a pandemic and uncertainty and the loss of freedoms and power and that kind of thing. And I just think it's really important to keep in mind that you are your number one, and you need to take care of yourself, and whatever that means to you, so that you can de-stress and detox and whatever it is, if it's taking a walk or taking a bath or doing meditation or yoga, doing journaling, taking a few minutes just to be instead of do. I know for me, A-type, like I'm go, 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 go. And so now it's like, okay, wait, I don't have to be uber productive all the time. I can take a minute and just relax. So just to take care of yourself so that we can get through this time. There's a ton of free resources out there from like the assemblage and the General Assembly and the RAP and headspace.com and get on but really the whole word, .com. They're all offering some really great free resources that you can do during this time. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what else to add to that. There, obviously, you can see by the last the faces on the screen, the last 12 years, we've really built a wonderful family, and everybody who's watching this now, you're a part of that family, and that's important to us. So in this time where we're in it's a new environment, like Molly says, that you're here and pursuing your craft or pursuing your dreams, even if this is just a temporary distraction, if you need some time to get away from the news or whatever, that's a huge step forward, because you're absorbing what is going to be brilliant information from the wonderful Jen Grisanti in a few minutes. So thank you all for being here and participating in this. Thank you for supporting the ISA. We're here to then send it back to you and support you. With all, like everyone said, the resources on the site, there's a ton of free stuff there. And there's writing gigs to submit to, and Max, the Director of Education, is, in addition to what you'll be learning from Jen, some great stuff you can learn there. So thank you, everybody. It's wonderful that you're here and participating in this and taking the steps towards elevating your career and your craft. So I'll just pass it back to Max to introduce Jen, but thank you again, Jen. It's amazing to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Great to be here.
And I think I want to point out that we're at 510 attendees. If I could clap loudly, I would, but it would probably affect the volume. But pretty cool. We have so many people here.
Thanks to all of you. I'm so grateful to be here. ISA, I love this community. I love everything that they do to highlight writers and really celebrate. So it is an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Jen.
All right, everybody, enjoy, and get your thinking caps on. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Max. Okay. Hello to everybody all over the world, from what I understand. So good morning to many of you. I want to thank you so much for joining us for this very special event by ISA. When they reached out to me to do this, I was very, very excited to be a part of this, because I recognize that right now it is so essential to feel a part of a community, to connect with one another, and the fact that they have ongoing events that continuously connect all of you is such a gift. So today, to give you an idea, what I'm going to do is I do have a link of the stuff that I'm going to go over. So that's my Google Doc. Just know that the whole experience of this, Max is right. I do have some different terminology. So don't feel flustered. Most of my terminology has a very practical meaning as far as trigger, dilemma, pursuit. If you know my philosophy, then these are very familiar terms to you. If you are new to me, this is part of a story system, part of an aha moment for me when I was writing my book, Storyline, Finding Gold in Your Life Story. So I'll give you a brief bit about me. I think I may have skipped that when Max asked me to do that. I am a story career consultant at Grisanti Consultancy, Inc. I am a writing instructor for writers on the Verge at NBC. I am a former 12-year studio executive. I worked at Spelling Television and CBS Paramount. I was a vice president of current programs at CBS Paramount, and I ran current programming at Spelling Television in the heyday of 90210, the original, and Melrose, the original. Aaron Spelling was my mentor for 12 years, so I was very blessed to be a part of that company at such a pivotal time. And all of that led me here. And when I opened my business in January of 2008, it was on the heels of a life turn, which I'm sure so many of you can connect and relate with. So I had a sudden turn in my career aspiration. I thought I was on the road to running a studio. I thought everything that I was doing was moving me to that outcome. And suddenly on a day with a heated discussion that kind of took a turn, everything changed. And that's when my career took a new direction. And oddly for me, as I'm sure many of you can relate with, certainly with everything going on right now with this pandemic, when life takes a turn, I encourage you to be open to everything that you can learn and comes to you during that turn, because that is where your gold is, and that is what connects you to your audience. So my turn led me to open Grisanti Consultancy, Inc. in 2008. It was right in the middle of the writer's strike, so it was a very vulnerable time to be opening my own business and taking myself off of the corporate job list. And at that time, I knew that I wanted to move closer to the creative process. And I had the good fortune of being a current programming executive. And what that means is I got to give notes on up to 5 top primetime shows a week. And I got to see my notes made every week. And I helped to staff the writers and directors on over 15 top primetime shows. So it was a tremendous training ground for story. For all of us, life has taken a turn and a shift. And what is going to transform in this time in story is going to be monumental. There are so many universal themes that we are all going through that are going to have so much value on the page when things open up again. So really being present during this time is crucial. And as Molly mentioned, meditation. I am a huge meditator. I absolutely believe in law of attraction. I believe in really defining what you want, why you want it, and meditating on it and believing it. So a large part of what I work with writers on is understanding their emotional truth and doing the work to heal with their emotional truth. Because when you do the healing, then you will find that your well is that much more open to draw from in the stories you tell. So I'm going to add one meditation link. Headspace I do every day, as Molly mentioned. Insight Timer is another one that I highly, highly recommend. So it's insighttimer.com, INSIGHT, timer.com. This is life-changing as far as get on there, take courses on anxiety, take courses on stress, take courses on meditation and positivity and creativity, and be open, because I cannot begin to tell you the amount of content that is coming through me at this time with meditating. So if you are not a meditator, I highly recommend that you do this. If you are a meditator, then you may even want to meditate more than just what your current routine is, because you are going to find that there is a definite link between meditation and creativity and how story is going to come through you. So I have had writers who are on both spectrums, as far as I've had writers who during this time, they can't write because it's too big, it's too emotional, they feel blocked, and that's okay. So recognize that when you are in the mindset that you can't write because there is too much going on in the world, then do other things. Watch TV, watch film, read poems, think about things that make you feel. Like when you watch films and you watch television, if something makes you cry or something makes you laugh, then write it down. Write down what emotion did it hit? What memory did you think about when you cried or when you laughed? Because these are the things that as soon as everything opens up again, these are the feelings that we all want to feel. We all want to laugh. Obviously comedy is going to be big after this. Family shows, the assumption is that family shows will be big. The idea of my personal favorite type of show is the international political thriller. So we are going to look at Fauda today. I don't know if hopefully many of you have watched Fauda on Netflix. If you haven't, I'm excited to introduce it to you through going through some of my terminology and then having you look at it in a clip. And the value of this is so that when you look at things in a clip, then it helps. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you watch the clip all the way through, and then I'm going to read the comments on each scene section that I did that goes with a lot of what I teach. So this will give you a glimpse. If you have taken my Storywise teleseminar, this is all new. So this is actually something that will be a part of my next product. So this was a perfect opportunity to move through this. Another show that is my absolute, I honestly don't know that I've seen a series that I have loved at this level through 3 seasons. And that show is The Bureau on Amazon, or Le Bureau. So this show is mind-blowing. We literally have gone through 3 seasons in no time, and it's something that I am so excited to get back to because it's so emotional, it's so connecting, there's high energy, there are twists and turns that you don't see coming. The characters, you get so close to these characters because they're in such extreme situations, and the external and the internal stakes are so high, and it is really fascinating seeing story through the lens of these incredibly talented writers and directors from different countries, and really looking at, you know, what are the focal points for them, and I just cannot speak highly enough of looking at shows like that as well. It will be interesting when things open up to see if those shows are still as big as they are right now. I believe that they will be. Okay, so why don't we start with, I would like to title this talk, Telling Story from the Inside Out. So if you're familiar with my brand is all about emotional truth and all about the idea of being vulnerable and the idea of giving us a deep glimpse inside your story. So that's everything that I'm going to touch on today. I am a believer that the internal story, again, will be monumental in the healing that we are all going to go through, the entire world, after things open up again. So starting with the biggest thing to think about, 2 questions I want you to think about. And I know many of you are about to turn your pilots into Writers on the Verge. The deadline for Writers on the Verge is May 10th. So if you have not turned them in, I know that you are going to turn them in, and I'm going to give you a checklist. So we're going to go over a pilot checklist that if you have not turned them in are some things that you may want to think about. And it's not just for your entry for Writers on the Verge, it's for all the writing competitions that are coming up. It's for staffing, it's for development, it's for all of it. And you know, you have to recognize everything is gonna keep going in a very big way because content is what has been comforting all of us. So there is going to be an extremely high demand with all these streaming places to populate with content. So the best thing you can do right now is control what you can control, and that is your writing. So again, if you are in the headspace mindset where you can't write, then do other things that are going to creatively inspire you. If you are in the headspace where you can write, then recognize that for you to observe and absorb what is going on and bring it to the page, then, and believe in it and meditate on it and see it, then things will happen. So again, the 2 questions I want you to think about: what is your story about? What are you about? Probably the biggest questions to succeed in this business is having a very clear understanding of what is your story about. And there are many people who, I would say a majority, who write scripts with understanding what their story is about on an external level, but not having a strong understanding of what it's about on an internal level. So understanding the internal dynamics of your story is really what your story is about. So with those two questions, and then what are you about? So you are who we want to feel in your story. We want to have an understanding of who you are as a writer, how you see the world, how you see your story, and what you want to say with it. So in looking at this, I want you to think about these key points under the idea of what is your story about and what are you about. Emotional dynamic. So when you look at shows like The Good Wife and like Homeland, these are shows that the emotional dynamic and the internal story are a large part of why these shows worked at the level that they did. Homeland just ended. It was brilliant the last season. It really held strong. And Homeland actually moved away from the core concept with Brody, but it continued to really set up each season in a very powerful way that worked. And I want you to look at the value of the emotional dynamic of the characters as a selling point. And I want you to think about the emotional dynamics in your TV pilot, because this is a large part of what it is about. Worldview. So worldview is huge. A note that I give in so many of my consults is I have no idea who the primary worldview is in the opening. And that is your time to really set up your character, set up the personal dilemma, set up the wound, set up the flaw, and know with the idea of the flaw, you want to create empathy before you set up the flaw. And the value of the flaw is the flaw humanizes your character and connects your character to your audience. So in your series setup, the central character is reacting and something happens to them that pushes them into a compelling dilemma. So coming out of your opening, I want to know why I care. I want to have an understanding of your world. I want to know who your main worldview is. And I want to have a sense of who this character is. So these are things that I want you to think about. Another thing I want you to think about with your title of your pilot. So I always, like all of us, when we're looking at Netflix and Amazon and we're thinking, what do we want to watch? And the biggest thing that I find that I gravitate towards is titles that pull me in, that make me connect. Recently, I watched a film called Outside In, and the title reflected the central conflict of the lead character who was wrongly convicted and imprisoned and then got out and had to integrate back into life. And the title perfectly reflected this idea. And it was such a simple but beautiful story with Edie Falco. And what that showed me was when the title reflects the central conflict, then we know what your show is. We know what it's about. So that is something to think about. Then following your series setup, so you have your central character is reactive in the series trigger and dilemma. Dilemma is something that came to my awareness after I was a studio executive. So the power of understanding how to utilize the dilemma in story has made a tremendous difference. So when I look at the 76 pilots that have been sold by the writers that I've worked with, I recognize that the story system that I set up for them, which sounds very complicated when we're talking series, trigger, and dilemma, pilot, trigger, dilemma, pursuit. And Max said many people don't know what pursuit means. Pursuit means goal. Pursuit, the word pursuit, the reason I like it is that it shows that the central character needs to be active. And so many people make the mistake of having reactive central characters. So setting up your pilot, trigger, dilemma, pursuit, then going further into the story system, recognizing that in every act, your central character should take an action toward the goal, hit an obstacle, and the stakes should be raised. And many people don't define the goal. And when the goal isn't defined, then the act breaks don't work. Because at the act break, your central character should be hitting an obstacle that elevates the stakes and that links back to the goal. And if we don't know what your central character wants and why they want it, then your act breaks don't work at the level that they could work. So that is something that I want you to think about. Another thing I want you to think about under the idea of what is your story about, what are you about, is the theme. So I have often found that when I look at writers who understand how to have a strong title, how to have a strong theme, and a strong central conflict, and there's a link between all three, then I know that this is a writer who has an advanced sense of story. And the thing about story, I can tell you, I have now I've been a story lover since I was a child, but I have been in active pursuit of story and analyzing story for over 25 years. So I can tell you that the brilliance in TV writing right now, especially, also in film writing, but TV writing is really at an all-time high, in my opinion. And there is so much to continuously learn through writers who understand story at a very advanced level. And there are many of you that I'm sure who are newer writers. There are many of you who have probably been writing 15, 20 years. And just know you are always learning. You are always learning about what works and what doesn't work. And don't be afraid to push the envelope and to go outside the box and do things. Now, I'm a big proponent of, I'm a big believer of structure. So I believe that structure is freedom. And I believe that when you have strong structure, then I also believe structure is emotion. And for us to feel your story, when the structure is correct, when you have active act breaks where we feel the goal, where we understand the internal and the external stakes, then you're bringing us to a greater consciousness and awareness of what you're trying to say with your story. And the other point, so with theme, when I was an executive and I had 300 scripts behind me, the points of story that really resonated with me were writers who understood theme, symbolism, and message. So those are things that I really want you to think about with your scripts. Did you do a pass? Now, very often writers write the story first and then think about the internal dynamics, or think about the theme, or think about the message. And I do think that that works. You have to really be open to how a story coming through you, a story coming through you in a way that the external plot is easier for you to write. Or is it easier for you to start with, what do I want to say with my story? And then how do my series trigger and dilemma and pilot trigger dilemma pursuit link with what I'm trying to say? So if you start with that, you might find that it makes it easier. Or you might find that it's easier for you to do the external plot and then look at things like theme, symbolism, message. So that is something I want you to think about. Message, when you're thinking about message and you're thinking about, what do I want to say with my story? So for example, when I show you the clip for Fauda, I want you to think about, what is the message that I am feeling from this story? I want you to think about that. I want you to write that down. I want you to think about your own story. And maybe some of you are going to hit aha moments as to, I didn't really think about what my internal story was about. And that's okay. So know that now is the time for you to dive back in and to look at the story from the inside out. So that goes into, what is your story about? What are you about? Pilot checklists. So these are things that I will, when I'm reading scripts, so these are things that I check off in my mind. So when I do TV pilot consults with my one-on-one consults, or when I'm looking at the top 20 writers for Writers on the Verge, these points are things that I look at when I am going through pilot scripts. So the first thing I look at is definitely the opening. I should feel by the end of the teaser, if you have one, or the end of Act 1 if you don't have a teaser, I should know why I care. If I don't know why I care, that is a big mistake. So when you go into the personal dilemma and you set up why your character wants what they want, then you give us a glimpse inside. You help us to know why I care. You're going to see in Fauda that the idea of why I care is so crystal clear, not necessarily in the very opening, but when we get a deeper glimpse into Duran and how he's going to be affected through his worldview. Then we go so deep into the story so quickly. So I want you to look at that when we go through the clip. Then I look at the idea of central conflict. So central conflict is not an easy thing to grasp. And a way that I've thought about that has kind of come through me when I'm meditating and thinking about story and thinking about, how do we feel central conflict? I want you to think about the dream. I want you to think about the biggest fear of the central character. And then I want you to think about the wound and the flaw. So I want you to think about all those points. Then I want you to think about, what is splitting your character? How are they being pulled in two separate directions? And those directions are, if it's written well, linked to the childhood wound or the wound that happened right before we enter the story. So that is something to give some thought to, because when you look at, for example, a show like Bodyguard on Netflix, that central conflict was so powerful that it really, you know, made that show and series what it is. When you have a bodyguard who is faced with the dilemma when he is given the opportunity to essentially be the bodyguard for a woman who made decisions politically that led to his wound when he was in the military, leading to his post-traumatic stress and the split of his family. Then you recognize, is he going to be loyal to his comrades of his past, to the military, to the family that he wants to put back together, or to his future and this politician who made choices that led to his wound? So powerful. So something for you to think about with your central conflict. The connection between the series arc and the pilot arc. There are so many writers who will say to me, well, isn't the series logline the same as the pilot logline? And the answer to that question is no. Your series logline is what your series is about. Your pilot logline is the summary of the A story. So if you want to think in big steps, your series trigger and dilemma is setting up the question that is driving season 1. And your pilot arc is one step toward that answer. So in Homeland, the question of, is Brody the prisoner of war who turned, or isn't he? And then the pilot arc is one step toward that answer when Carrie has to prove to Saul that maybe Brody is the prisoner of war that turned. And that is the pilot arc, yes. So the series arc is setting up your season 1. The series arc question. So you have a series trigger and dilemma that should bookend with your setup of your series at the end of your pilot. So you should have a bookend with the series setup and the end, and you're setting up season 1. So in Homeland, is Brody the prisoner of war who turned, or isn't he? So that's setting up season 1. The pilot arc, because Carrie heard the prisoner tell her there's an American prisoner of war who turned, that's your series arc. That has relevance when Carrie gets home and suddenly is told that an American prisoner of war is coming home a hero. And that's Brody. So now, because the series trigger and dilemma happened that pushed her into a dilemma, she has an opportunity to take action due to what she knows from the series setup. Series logline is different than the pilot. Yeah, the pilot arc is one step toward the answer. Thank you. Who printed that? I love that. So know that. So just know that there is a difference. Your pilot arc, the goal gets achieved. Your series arc is ongoing. So be aware of that. Wound and flaw. So this is the wound and the flaw are two other elements that I wasn't tremendously conscious of when I was a studio executive. And upon leaving and having my own wound to heal from, with my career taking a turn, oddly and ironically, in the direction that I wanted it to be all along, but I still had to go through the turn to see that, feel that, and understand that. So the wound and the flaw took on a new meaning for me because of what I was going through in my own life and my own emotional truth. And when I was an executive, what I learned about emotional truth was that emotional truth connects you to your audience. And I when I went through my terms, I suddenly found that when I shared them with writers, that writers would open up to me, and I would hear all about their emotional terms. And I'd say to them, have you ever written about that? And I'd say, I'm not talking about writing about that in an autobiographical way. I'm talking about writing that in a way of sharing your emotional truth and bringing us inside a life experience that you know on an intimate level. So that is what really made me see that when we understand what is the wound that is driving your character and what is the flaw that gets in the way, then we connect. We connect with your character because we see ourselves in them. And this is what you want, because in TV in particular, the audience comes back. They come back for your character or characters. So when you look at shows, for example, like Mad Men, like Breaking Bad, where those push the envelope at that point in time and went outside the box, and they brought us into worldviews that we didn't know at that time. And that's what you want to do. I mean, I have almost found that the worldview of the central character has as much power as the concept of the pilot, if not more. So you really want to create characters that we want to return to. And if we don't know your central character, then that gets in the way of that. And know with the questions, I will absolutely go through the questions. I'm going to get you covered with that. So clear goal, I talked about. You want to make sure you have a clear goal so that at your act breaks, we should feel what your central character wants, why they want it. We should feel the internal and the external stakes. Resolution moment. This is another very big thing for you to think about on the checklist. Do you have a pilot goal resolution in your last act? And what I mean by this is you should have an all is lost moment, whether it's comedy or drama, in your second to last act. The all is lost moment is when your central character takes an action toward the goal, hits an obstacle, and they hit rock bottom. They are as far away as possible from achieving the goal. Then they have an aha moment or an epiphany. And then at the top of the last act, they take an action that leads toward the achievement of the goal. So you have a triumph moment. You have a moment of glory for the one step toward the series arc, season 1 arc. You have a triumph moment. Then you're setting up the series. So then you want to have breathing room to set up your series. So you want to end one part and you want to open up the season arc. Let's see. So, and then the other thing I look for is, does your series setup at the end, do you bookend it? Does the series trigger and dilemma bookend with the setup of your series at the end? And do I feel the question that is driving season 1? So these are all things that I want you to think about with your pilot checklist. I don't want any of you to feel like, oh my God, I didn't do that, therefore my story is not working. Do not let it go. Just recognize that when you dive back in, you're going to look at it maybe through a lens that is going to help you understand how to elevate your story even more. So for now we're going to do a clip of Fauda. The story is so strong and so Fantastic. I know that the subtitles, it's getting used to, you have to watch this show. It is mind blowing. And the tempo and the momentum is like this. So, and the emotion is, you get so connected with these characters. So quickly, I'm going to go through some of the points that I talked about with you. Then we'll go into the questions, and then we'll go into some of the essay stuff for writers on the Verge. So what I want you to think about with the opening of the story, certainly we have no idea who is on what side as far as positive or negative, but we see them take a gentleman, the Israelis take a man hostage. So we're seeing the world and we're being introduced to the team, which is what the show is about. Then we're going into the world view. We're then going into the questioning where Captain Abby questions Ali, and we learn about Captain Abby. We learn that he has 5 kids and that he doesn't agree with Ali not taking care of his daughter, and he utilizes his knowledge of this gentleman's daughter as a way to persuade him to give him the answer that he wants. So while questioning, Captain Gabby uses the situation with the man's daughter and her being in need of kidney transplant. He comments on his lack of action to do this and how in the man's culture, children are at the bottom of the priority list. Gabby tells Ali that he could save his daughter. He shares that he has 5 children, emotional insight of one of the main characters. He says that he would jump through hoops for them. And then he asks Ali who is behind the nerve gas. And Ali tells him Abu Ahmad. And then further defines it as the Panther, which Gabby thinks is false because they killed the Panther. But Ali is telling him the Panther is alive. So what that does is it tells you that we had a trigger before we entered the story. So the trigger before we entered the story was Joran thought that he killed the Panther. So you have that trigger and that time period between that and the series trigger and dilemma that is fertile ground for story. Then we meet Joran and we see him and his kids. So this sets up the personal stakes. We see the personal side of the primary character. Then let's see, he tells Joran that Abu Ahmad is alive. So Moreno goes to see Joran. He tells him that the Panther is alive. And Moreno tells Joran that he won't be alive for much longer. He and the team plan to kill him at the brother's wedding the next day. Moreno explains to Joran that he could use someone that already killed him before. He tells him that if he's not ready to go back on the field, he can stay in the command post. Joran says no. Moreno says that he thought Joran would want to settle the score. Joran says that he settled his score with the Panther. So they hug, Moreno leaves. So at that point, the answer is no. So we recognize that Joran has a lot at stake. We see that that was his past. His present is his family. They are the priority. So that gives us a glimpse of the emotional stakes. Then we see the 2 brothers in the scene where one brother takes the other brother who doesn't know it's his brother and then winds up giving him a gift for him and his bride. And that brother is the Panther. So then Joran awakens from a bad dream. He goes back to his old bag. So that's like his old self. And we see him look in the mirror. And then his wife comes out, which further elevates the personal stakes. Duran shows up, he sees his old team, and they welcome him. And it's at this point that Duran is going to become an active character. He's going to be in an active pursuit because he tells Moreno he is not only coming back, he wants to be on the field. So he doesn't need to be in just the command post. So that gives you an idea. And what I want you to do is I want you, when you're going through stories, so when you're going through like Netflix shows in particular, watch the pilot 2 times and watch the series all the way through. Then come back and watch the pilot again. And when you do that, then you see how they set up season 1. You have total clarity, and it will help you understand how to set up season 1 in your pilot in the best way possible. So now I'm going to answer some questions, and then we will get back into the essay questions for writers on the Verge and some things that I want you to think about when you are filling them out.
Okay, so can you speak about act breaks now with the streaming platforms like Netflix, HBO? Is that a similar structure? How does that change with streaming?
It is. So whether you're writing with act breaks or not, you have to write toward the act breaks. So you still need those pivotal points in your story. You just don't have the breaks, but we should feel the breaks. So I often tell writers, if you feel that your story could be network or cable, that you might want to have a draft that has act breaks in it, and then one that you take the act breaks out.
Can you apply these principles to comedy?
Yes. Everything that I'm talking about applies to comedy. Certainly when you look at comedy now, you're looking at the single camera, which is drama and comedy. So you're looking at the 3-act structure. So it is the same thing, second to last act. You have the series trigger and dilemma. You have pilot trigger, dilemma, pursuit. And you have the all is lost moment at your second to last act. You have the resolution moment at the top of your last act.
The difference between a season logline, a series logline, a pilot logline, what do you go out to contests with, or when you're writing a pitch, what do you use in your pitch?
Well, I mean, the series logline embodies your show. And I would combine the series and the season logline are the same. So you're looking at, you know, when you're out there selling, obviously you're selling the series through the pilot. So I know writers that use both in their pitch, and I know writers who just use the series logline. So you have to look at with your show what you think is the best selling point. And if it is a strong selling point for you to use both, then you should use both.
Does your pilot need a B storyline?
Yes, I believe. Now, I'm going to tell you that there are many shows that are very linear that have what feels like just an A story. Usually, there is an A story, which very often is the external. Then there is a B story that is the personal or the internal. Or if it's a big cast, I tell people to think about it more as the B side of the A story when you're going into the personal, and then the B story. Now, I have seen comedies that just have an A story. And I think depending on the strength of that story, you can do that. However, I do encourage you to have a B story.
Can the teaser set up the end of the season 1, or should it only tease the events in the pilot?
No, the teaser should set up the season. So the teaser, your series trigger and dilemma should be the first step, and then your end of your pilot episode should be the bookend that sets up the season. So your season setup is bookending. It's a continuation of the series setup. And very often when you're looking at the series setup, you often, when you look at a pilot like Luther, you've got like 3 to 4 beats of the series arc within the pilot. And then you have the pilot pursuit that gets resolved, and then you move on into the season arc.
How important is it for the protagonist's core wound need to be stated in the pilot? It seems as though some good pilots focus more on the protagonist's flaw than a specific wound. And then there's a follow-up question from some other people, if you can just go into the difference between the flaw and the wound again.
Okay, yes, perfect example. So I would imagine many of you have seen Dead to Me. So when you look at Dead to Me, the first thing we see, the first image, is we see a neighbor bringing over a casserole. So that communicates to us that chances are the lead character who opens the door, Jenny, that she's gone through a loss. So that communicates we feel empathy. Then the neighbor says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through." And she replies with a very sarcastic comment of, "Well, it would be like if your husband got hit by a car and was left to die by the road." And we see her flaw. Her flaw is her anger. So we first feel empathy, then we feel her flaw. And this connects us to her. And in the flaw, now the wound does not need to be stated. We can see it definitely doesn't need to be stated. We can see the wound in action. So when you look at a show like Fleabag's wound, so her childhood wound is the emotional abandonment of her father. The flaw that stems from that wound, and he's the negative parent, the flaw that stems from that wound is her promiscuity. And that we see in action at the beginning of the pilot.
How much freedom is there with page count and structure? There's a couple of different questions. So is there more freedom with page count because the streaming shows are 40, 45 minutes long? And how many episodes should you go out with? How many episodes do you need to have fully written?
Well, I mean, ideally, you only need your pilot episode. You need your pilot episode, you need a Bible. Yes, when you're looking at streaming shows, if you are extra ambitious and you want 6 episodes in a season, you could maybe write the second episode. I don't recommend writing all 6 episodes. My feeling is that the studio or streaming place that they want to develop the show. So the more important thing for you to do is write a pilot that cannot be ignored, and then have a Bible that shows that you fully see and understand your show and have a full well of story to draw from.
Do you think the supporting characters should be reflections of just different aspects of the protagonist?
Yes, I think that, the supporting character, yes. So you should look at, I've heard things when you look at I love when the antagonist and the protagonist want the same thing for different reasons. When you have characters, when you look at the central conflict and you have characters that are pulling them in one direction and characters that are pulling in another direction, then there's a purpose for those characters. I am a believer, like when you look at shows like Fauda and like The Bureau, now both these shows have subtitles, and I'm going to tell you, you don't even notice the subtitles because you get so immersed in the show that you don't even notice the idea that you're watching this story through subtitles, because they are so good and because the characters are so well developed.
Can you make any recommendations for books and shows to look at for structure examples?
I should have put a list of my favorite shows. I did put it on Facebook. I also put it in my last newsletter. So here's my list. I'm just going to go off the top of my head of the shows that I'm obsessed with right now. So Fauda, as you saw, The Bureau, Califat on Netflix, education on Netflix. Obviously, Fleabag and Dead to Me, I'm obsessed with and love. Succession and Billions, I love. Now, these are shows. I'm all about shows that are written at a level that really connect you, and not that have, you know, great show here, a great show there, but they have many hits and misses. I'm all about shows that have very well thought out season arcs, and I get how every episode is moving us toward or away from the season arc question. Our answer. So yes, hopefully that answers that.
How is a Bible written and presented? How
Yes.
do you need this to go out with?
So the interesting thing is, when I started my career as a studio executive, that was 1994. So that, at that time, Bibles were like 30 to 50 pages. Now it's a whole new world. So now you're really looking at Bibles that could be anywhere from 6 to 18 pages. I would say 6 to 12 pages is probably the average of where Bibles are at. And again, the Bible is really just the selling card for you to say, I have a huge well of story. I know my show. I see my show. These are the episodes that could take place. These are the season arcs that I'm thinking about. These are the character dynamics that I want to explore. So it's all about selling that you fully see and get your concept, and you could write a series and write it well. Okay, guys, so the 3 questions on Writers on the Verge, which I would imagine many of you, if you are submitting, know the questions, but let's take a look at the 3 questions. They are, write the last paragraph of your autobiography. So now with this question, you can get totally creative. This could be, you know, what you think it is, or it could be something totally different that represents your voice and how you see through your lens that question. So don't be afraid to get creative and go outside the box. Tell us about a moment from your childhood that has shaped who you are as an adult today. So again, childhood wound. I mean, from all the essays that I've read in years past, from writers who make it into Writers on the Verge, the wound that is communicated very often in the strongest essays, we get a very clear connection between the wound and what they write about and what they want to say to the world and send out to the world. It is connected. So they're giving us a glimpse inside who they are as a writer and their voice. So again, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Recognize that writing reveals and writing brings us inside. I mean, some of the best writing is when you'll see characters say things that you would never say. You would think, but you would never say. That is when we get a glimpse inside. So dive deep into what makes you want to write. What do you have to say to the world, and how does that stem from your childhood wound? Then the 3rd question is, what rule of writing do you find yourself breaking the most often? So don't be afraid of this one either. And I know that many people don't want to go into their weaknesses. You only want to go into your strengths. But really what this question is doing is it's asking you, do you see your strengths and weaknesses? Do you see what you could use work on? And truthfully, like if you write a script and you have an essay that fully communicates voice, for example, but structure is something that stymies you a lot of the time. Don't be afraid to say that. Say, you know, structure has been my weak spot and I'm put a lot of work into it, and you know, that's my area that I find myself wanting to break the rules for, because it often doesn't go with what I'm trying to say, or something like that just gives us, again, a glimpse inside your creative process and helps us know that you have an awareness of your strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, the program is all about teaching. I mean, we certainly don't expect writers to come in and know everything. That's not the point of the program. The point of the program is that you are at a very advanced level, and we want to take you to the point to where staffing, development, and everything happens. So being aware of your own strengths, weaknesses, vulnerabilities is not a bad thing. That tells us who you are as a person and as a writer. So some things I want you to think about with your essays is, I want you to think about, these are the words I want you to think about: creativity, so don't be afraid to go outside the box; vulnerability, make us feel what you're bringing us into; linking to what you write; communicate. So you can have somebody who has 5 traumatic moments as a child, but obviously you're not going to go into 5 moments. You're going to go into the most pivotal moment that informed your voice. And you're going to tell a story, which is what it is all about, in a way that brings us inside what you have to say. Emotional truth, give us a glimpse inside. We want to feel your voice. So voice is everything. And voice, in my opinion, very often comes through vulnerability, comes through the things you are the most afraid to write, you should write. So moving past those boundaries. Awareness of strengths and weaknesses, we talked about that. And then thinking about, like, negative narrative in your own essay. So, for example, what rule of writing do you find yourself breaking the most? You know, structure is obviously going to be one of the most common, and that's okay, because structure is what people struggle with probably the most. And character, I think, is another thing that people don't really understand how to dive into the backstory of a character in the present, so that we feel what happened in the past rather than having it in exposition. The negative narrative, when you think about what has maybe held you back as a writer and how you're moving through things. So when you're filling out these essays, I love the essay part of Writers on the Verge. I learned so much between the essay and the pilot script, as far as who you are, what your voice is, and what you have to say to the world. And that, if done well, tells me a lot. So that gives you insight into that. So we can continue with questions. And so we'll do 5 more questions and then we'll close.
Awesome. Can you give us the background on Writers on the Verge for those of us who don't know what it is, when it deadlines, what it can do for a career?
Yes. So Writers on the Verge is a diversity writing program that NBC does. It is, now I'm going to tell you, there are many writers who will ask the question, do I need to live in LA? I would say the majority of the time, the writers that make it in live in Los Angeles or New York, or they're in a position where they can be in Los Angeles very readily for the 12-week program. So it is a 12-week program that is designed to get writers to a point where staffing and development and selling pilots, and that all of that becomes a possibility. So we have them write, we put them in a boot camp type experience. We have them pitch pilots, 2 pilots, and then we decide which is the strongest. Then they write that pilot within that time period, 8 to 12 weeks. And then there's a business side of it where they get to meet executives, they get to meet showrunners, they get to meet, you know, all the decision makers and be exposed to the process of what it is to be a working writer. So the goal of the program really is to staff writers on NBC shows. That is the main goal of the program. And we've had writers staff, we've had many years where we have had several writers staff. We have had years where several writers staff and there'll be 2 or 3 that didn't, but then maybe another year, 2, 3 years later, they'll staff. So the program has had a strong success rate because we organize it in a way where the writer gets a very strong sense of what it is to be a working writer with regards to how quickly you have to write a script and what it is to be in the writer's room, what it is to give and receive notes.
If you don't have anything on your resume, no writing credits, what should the Writers on the Verge resume have on it?
Marketing points. I mean, you want to think about any jobs that you have had. Now, there are so many jobs out there that are fascinating from the writer world point of view. So if you do have a job that is fascinating, or a story point, or something, a marketing point, you know, that helps shape who you are, then utilize that. If you don't worry about the fact that you don't have a resume that's full of writing stuff, don't worry about that at all. I definitely believe that strong content finds its way. So if you write a script that cannot be ignored, and then you write an essay that shows us who you are, then that puts you in a very strong place.
Can you talk about how the judging is going to work now that there are 2 pilots submitted? Are they both judged the same? What if one is stronger and the other needs some rewrites?
I'm sorry. Sorry, Molly. I was looking at somebody's comment. Go ahead. Say, what did you say?
Yeah. Can you talk about the judging, since now you're asking for 2 pilots? Are they both judged the same? What if one is stronger and one needs rewrites?
Well, I think the expectation is very rarely are you going to have 2 writers that have 2 pilots that are equal in strength. So that is to be expected. The pilot script is the hardest script to write. So writers have to know that. I mean, when I started my career, showrunners, new writers didn't write pilots then. So the value now that new writers are writing TV pilots from the very start puts you guys so far ahead of so many writers who haven't written pilots till they're a showrunner. And even showrunners who've been on staff for 8, 10, 12 years struggle with writing the pilot script. So it is a very, very difficult script to write. So don't feel like the expectation is both scripts have to be equally as strong. If one is incredibly strong, but the other shows your voice, but maybe isn't as strong structurally, that's okay. That is to be expected. Again, the program is to learn, grow, and evolve. And so the expectation goes with that. It's the hope that you write something that resonates in a universal way that makes any weakness that you have not a weakness, but instead something that you can learn through the process of Writers on the Verge.
And can one of those pilots be one that was submitted last year and has been revised?
Okay, in my experience, I would say no. that's if you find at this point in time that you cannot write 2 new pilots, then do it. But from what we talked about before the decision was made that it was going to be 2 pilots and not a spec, the thing that we talked about was 2 new pilots, not a pilot that has been submitted before. And I know Warner Brothers feels the same way. I think they track all the pilots, as does Writers on the Verge. So if you revise it to a point where it's mind-blowing and they're willing to overlook that, that might happen. But I know when it was designed, the expectation was that it was going to be 2 new pilots.
And the moment from your childhood, does that have to be a painful moment? Can it be a happy moment? Can it be?
It can be a happy moment. Okay. If it informed your voice and gave, really led you to write the type of stuff you write. You might write comedy and very uplifting and funny stuff. And yeah, no, it can definitely be a joyous moment. And I think I did want to comment one more on someone, David, it might have been you, I think wrote in the chat, how do you know that you're not going to offend? I think that was your question. How do you know you're not going to offend someone with your story? I mean, it's your story. That's what you have to know. Like, it's how you feel. It's how you connect with the world. And really, we all have to let go of anything when it comes to story and be open to whatever a person's point of view is on the world based on your life. So in that sense, my feeling is nothing is offensive. So again, push the envelope, go outside the box. Don't be afraid, move past your fear. A quote that I came up with, let's see if I remember. When you look at the idea of your defined desire minus fear, you get abundance. So everything I can tell you, when I look at all the writing careers that I have helped launch over the last 25 years, every single one of those writers believed in that outcome, knew that it was coming. Nothing could stand in the way. They could be told no a million times. They believed in what they were doing. And if you find that your belief is a stumbling block for you, then you have to do the emotional work that is going to get you to the place where you believe your writing is in a place where it cannot be ignored and you are ready to be a working writer, because that is what you are going to sell.
What does diversity mean exactly? Does that mean that no white male is going to be selected?
No, doesn't mean that at all. No, in Writers on the Verge, we view diversity as anything that is a worldview that is outside mainstream. So because of what has happened in your life, you have something that is different than what we see in mainstream. So if you can communicate in a way that shows us that, again, you have something to say. I would say I've done it for 11 years now. We have had years where anywhere from 2 to 3 white writers will get in. I would say it's more often 2 that expressed very diverse worldviews. And I think one year when it was 3, that person was in a writing team with a diverse writer where, that became, it all worked. I mean, Writers on the Verge, diversity doesn't mean racial diversity. It really means a diverse worldview and how you communicate that diverse worldview.
Great. And should people be putting a positive spin on their weakness? Essays, should they have a confident spin or more of a humble vibe to them?
Well, That's a great question. There is a difference between overconfidence or cockiness and a quiet confidence and a knowing. So I don't think you should oversell. I think though that it should be very clear, like when you go into the phone interviews. I have seen so many writers who buckle on that phone call because they lose confidence, and you have to. And then I've seen the other extreme where I hear that it was more. I don't want to say confidence, because confidence, in my view, is a positive word. That there may have been an arrogance versus confidence. So just, you can never go wrong with being humble. You absolutely can't go wrong with being humble, but believe in your work. I mean, we want to know that you believe in your work, and you believe that the destiny that you want is going to happen. And if you don't believe in your work, know that that's part of the work that we're going to do with you if the writing is in this strong place. So it's all part of it. It's all part of it. The writing journey is an ongoing journey. It never stops. So many writers think, once I get an agent, everything will be perfect. Once I get a manager, then doors will open. Once I get staffed on a show, then I've made it. That's when the work begins. And the work never stops when you're a working writer. And the fear never stops when you're a working writer. So you have to learn to use that fear as a way to propel you instead of a way to hold you back.
That's perfect. And I know you wanted to mention the Autobiography before we head out.
Yes. Thank you. So a few things. So events that are going on, obviously do everything that ISA has going on, because the greatest way to move forward during this time is to feel connected, feel community, learn, grow, evolve. So make that your priority. That will make the writing come through you. Things will start to happen. On that note, Autobiography, because they're not doing the retreats, we couldn't do the retreat in Italy and France this year in April, and one was in July. They're doing Autobiography virtual. So I put that in the link. So you'll get the link to that, or just look up autobiography.com. Also, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Lee Jessup and Kayla Guess, who are doing a fabulous job on their What Should Writers Do Now series that you can find on YouTube. I also have that listed on the link that I gave you. And then if you have any interest in the services that I do, you can go to my website, jengrisanti.com. I put a special offer that I'll have for a week on a pilot consult on that link. I also have a special offer for my product, 5 Steps to Creating the Series, which is 8 modules full of information, very much like we went through today, going through 4 television shows, 2 comedies and 2 dramas, where we do breakdowns of all the shows. We go through clips and we talk about story. And that's it.
Excellent. And I did an interview with Claire Elizabeth Terry not too long ago. I'm going to put that link right in here. And of course, Jen gets a shout out in that as we talk about these. They're doing some really fun stuff out there. I can't wait for the virtual version. Is awesome that that's still an option, just like we have created this fun virtual world as well.
I agree.
We'll get back to normal, because wow, those events sound so cool.
Oh no, here's what I can tell you about Autobiography that is so magical. When you do the events, when you go anywhere, as we all know, I did Chicago with you guys. Like when you go anywhere and you're working on an arc of growth with writers, and you're seeing things happen due to the place that they're in, the things that they're learning, moving through their script, that is what keeps me going back to Rockaberry in a huge way, because being a part of that arc of growth and seeing what transpires is what it's all about. So yeah, so Claire told me she had a fabulous time on the interview with you. So that's great. Yeah. And Craig, you're going to be a mentor, right?
Felicity's going to be. Oh.
Yeah, there was talk of it, but now Felicity, she's got the job.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Great. Well, Felicity is going to love it. Yeah, going to love it. So, yeah. So, well, first of all, I want to thank all of you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so very grateful. I so appreciate this, and I'm so beyond impressed with everything that you're doing and the turnout that you have and the programs that you're offering. And I love your spotlight thing where you're really focusing on the writers that have accomplished in a major way as a way to get them out to industry. I think it's tremendous.
Well, it's always so informative having you on, Jen. And, you know, before we go, just for everybody still here, I want to remind everyone and kind of throw them back a little bit to what you were saying about making, you know, believing yourself and making sure that you have an understanding of your own worth, and all that emotional work is absolutely necessary. I think where it clicked for me, not that I have my emotional work figured out, but it comes from finding reasons in a logical sense as to why you should believe in yourself. And the only way to do that is to do the work over and over and over and over again, and not treat every single writing session like game day, like this is my day to perform, but instead have multiple practice days. And this is my day to not do well and not be good and find reasons why I'm bad to then fix it the next day, so that you can treat a particular day like a game day. Then you can remind
you are totally right
why this is working, right? This is why I believe in myself, because I've done this 1,000 times. So I know there are so many writers who are eager to get their first script out there, get people reading it, get people excited about it, and maybe they will. But in the meantime, you've got to be working on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, another 10 more. Otherwise, you're finding reasons why not to believe in yourself, because you'll be putting those early drafts out. So, you know, you got to be spending the time. And these events are ways to spend that time, reading books on screenwriting, watching movies, watching clips like the ones Jen put out. You've got to be putting that time in. So everyone who's sticking around for this long, this late, it's almost 10 p.m. here where Scott and I are in Wisconsin, you know, you got to be doing this.
Commitment. It is commitment to an outcome. It's an ongoing journey. Even like, as you say, Max, you could be in a writer's room and have your worst day in the world and feel like, oh my God, they're going to fire me the next day, and then be on fire the next day. It's just what life is. And it's accepting that, and it's being comfortable in your own skin, and it's making people want to be around you because they believe you have something to say and you believe you have something to say.
We're going to sign off in a second, but thank you again. I learned a ton, as I always do. I said it in the comments earlier. I'm like, it's so wonderful to hear the things that you have to say, and like it triggers. So it's so great to be doing these events, because it triggers all these like little moments on projects that I'm writing. And like when you got into the being a little more vulnerable, I was looking at myself. I'm like, oh my God, I can relate, even though this character is a female and she has a sister. I'm digging into a part of my relationship with my brother and my mom, and it's total trigger for the story.
Yeah,
so
I love
like,
that.
yeah, it's pretty incredible to have had that.
I love that.
Epiphany. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, cheers.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Wish you the best. Stay healthy.
All right.
Stay
Stay healthy,
everybody.
be well. Thank you for having me.